Everybody, it's me, Dr. Whimsy, and today we're talking about a subject that I get asked a lot about. And the question is, how do you lose weight? How do you stay healthy? And what's truth from fiction? Because there's a lot of fads on the market right now. There's a lot of lose weight quick fads, and I think some of them are not only irresponsible, they're not healthy diets, but in addition to not being healthy diets, they are expensive. And so the advice I'm going to give you today is how to do it in an inexpensive and responsible way to help you lose weight and stay healthy based on facts and not on fad. And so I have some notes here. It's based on an article I wrote, which is on my website, drwhimsy.com, if you'd like to read the full article. And I have linked it below. 5 simple tips for losing weight and staying healthy. And specifically, I call out 2 fads that are based on pseudoscience. The first is the Paleo Diet, and the second is the Bulletproof diet that is put out by Dave Asprey. Both of those very questionable science. I want to start off, full disclosure, I have a degree in anthropology from the University of Washington, and my doctoral degree was from the National College of Natural Medicine. It's one of 5 medical school programs recognized in the United States, and I'm licensed to practice medicine in the state of California. So I did have some education prior to researching this article. One of the myths about the paleo diet is that that I've been hearing is this idea of how cavemen used to eat. We've really changed our view about cavemen over the last few decades. One of the reasons is because women began to enter the field and collect data as anthropologists in the 60s and 70s, and that's because some of the schools finally allowed women into graduate programs. Prior to that, only men were allowed into those programs, and it skewed the data. Usually when you're going into the field and you're trying to collect data, you really want to do at least 2 years in the field, see a season twice before you can say that you have accurate data. And women were not there to collect data on gathering and how many calories were being taken up by gathering. It wasn't until the 70s that we saw that. And what we've learned from data collection is we've learned that pre-agricultural societies, about 90% were living in temperate zones, and they ate whatever was available to them. They did not eat processed food. They ate, obviously organic, wild-crafted. About 80 to 90% of the food gathered was plant-based, with about 10 to 20% being animal-based. They were not usually hunting large game because that was too labor intensive, and one of the first things that gatherers and hunters try to do is to conserve energy. And so most of it was small game, rodents, that sort of thing. There was an interesting archaeological dig that was found in, I think, what is today Russia, that showed that the people in that area were subsisting largely on trapping and catching rodents. That's an interesting find because that's a part of the world where people didn't have access to as much vegetation as we might see in a more temperate zone. So wild game, big game, eating large amounts of muscle, that was not really what we saw. We didn't see fractionated coconut oil, which is heavily processed, and with Bulletproof they mix it with palm oil. Environmentally, that's not a good idea. There's a couple reasons why it's not a good idea. The lab work I'm seeing coming back on my patients, they're getting fat. I've also seen malnutrition. They're loading up on butter and oil and coffee, and then they don't have an appetite to eat real food. And again, this is not a Paleolithic diet. People were not fractionating their coconut oil and then drinking it in a cup of coffee. And they were not eating muscle meat. They were prizing organ meat, which was more nutritious. And as I said before, When women went into the fields as anthropologists and were collecting data, they found that the vast majority in temperate zones of the food acquisition was coming from women who were gathering roots, berries, nuts, seeds. Wild grains were consumed. We know that because the archaeological digs and the archaeological examination of the teeth show starch deposits coming from grains that were wild in the area. And just as grain was not domesticated, neither was meat. So the people who are on the paleo diet are eating domesticated meat, but we won't eat domesticated grain. But guess what? Both are domesticated crops, as are all the vegetables we're currently eating today. They're all domesticated. An example would be broccoli, which is domesticated from a wild mustard. And they all come, all the mustard family, the domesticated plants come from the same progenitor, the same ancestor. The broccoli, the cauliflower, the mustard green, the kale. A lot of this stuff happened during the time of the Victorians, a lot of the new food crops we see. So my top 5 ways to lose weight that are based on what we really do know about the Paleolithic diet. Let's talk briefly about what we know about the Paleolithic diet. We know that they were eating foods that were local, minimally processed in their whole forms. They did cook. Cooking, humans harnessing fire and using fire for cooking. We can definitely say comfortably 500,000 years ago for sure, because we see fire pits with Homo erectus. But there's been theories that harnessing fire may have gone back 1 million, maybe even 2 million years. But comfortably we can say 500,000 years of harnessing fire, which led to us having more calories, because now we could process foods that we were not eating before, like tubers and roots, starchy foods which were roasted. It would soften them and then make them, we could consume them basically. And then our tool technology becomes very complicated. During Homo erectus, again, 500,000 years ago, we have the Acheulean toolkit, where hunting becomes more intensive. So yes, hunting happened. We have a strong archaeological record to support that. But again, it did not make up the majority of calories in temperate zones. About 11,000 years ago, agriculture takes place, and we see those people who were subsisting, they were living on a gatherer-hunter diet, get pushed into more extreme temperatures, and that may be why some people have gotten confused about these machismo images of hunters and gatherers living in cold areas. Yes, some peoples who were gatherers and hunters got pushed into northern and extreme climates because people who had been part of the agricultural revolution wanted to take lands that were more friendly to growing crops. So they ate local foods. There was some trading that happened. This gave way to more complicated trade routes, and I think that that's pretty interesting. The chicken, for example, comes from China, so somebody who was eating North American berries would not be eating chickens and eggs, which come from China, and they certainly wouldn't be adding it to coconuts that were coming from another region, and entirely different. Okay, so how do you lose weight? How do you stay healthy? How do you try and do this in a way that's responsible and is based on science? Number one tip I gave people is to begin counting calories. I know it's a drag, but at the very least, do it for the first month or two so you have a rough idea what your calorie intake is. Before I tell people how many calories they should take in, I get their measurements, I weigh them. I take a measurement of their, I do a lot of measurements, but I certainly measure their waist and hips so that I can find out if they're carrying a lot of belly fat. And then I do some calculations, what's called a BMR, and then to figure out how many calories they consume just to keep their metabolism going, and I do their BMI as well. And then from there I can figure out how many calories to give them per day based on their age, their gender, their level of physical activity, etc., etc., etc. So calories in, calories out, very important. There's a myth that if you eat late at night, you won't lose weight. It really, again, goes back to how many calories do you consume in a 24-hour period. Calories in, cannot stress it enough. And of course, you do have to take into consideration the metabolism of the person, how physically active they are, their age, their gender, etc. Number 2, stop eating prepackaged foods. Those are not particularly healthy. They're packed with sodium, they're packed with chemicals, and it doesn't help you if you're trying to eat nutrient-dense food that's fresh, loaded with antioxidants. It's not going to help you get there. So learn to cook from scratch, even if it means just preparing it a few times a week. And eat more, salads, minimally processed. See a piece of fruit, eat the piece of fruit. Don't overly process things. Chop up vegetables, mix it in a bowl, put some lemon juice on it, eat it. The less processing, the better. Third tip I had here was lower glycemic index is your friend. When we say lower glycemic index, we mean anything under a glycemic index of 55. I will put a link below so that you can figure out what the glycemic index is for the food you're eating. And I would also recommend you join myfitnesspal.com so that you can begin tracking your calories. I have here number 4, consume more fiber. This cannot be stressed enough. Fiber slows down gastric emptying, and it slows down how quickly glucose is entering the bloodstream, so you can get a more stable blood sugar that way. And that's really, really important, particularly if you are concerned that you have pre-diabetes, diabetes. Got to be able to consume more fiber in your diet. And here, number 4, eat less fatty meats and instead move towards plant-based proteins. And the beans and the legumes are not going to have the fat in them, so it's going to be better for heart health. But in addition to that, if you feel like you do need more protein to stabilize because it burns more slowly, I understand that. Not everyone's willing to be 100% plant-based. I don't judge. I'm just trying to help my patients. So then you can try the fatty fish. I recommend about 4 to 6 ounces in a serving of your protein, about approximately anywhere from 10 to 30% of the size of the plate. It usually works out, if you're looking at gatherers and hunters, depending upon what your ancestry is, again, genetics, physical fitness, age, weight, blah, 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 etc., etc., we can usually find out where you're holding with that. But in terms of calorie count, I have patients go anywhere from 70%, 60 to 70% of their calories being plant-based to 100%, depending upon, again, the goals, the needs of the patient. And then we emphasize fish, egg whites. Eggs are okay if your cholesterol is low. Try and go organic, wild fish if you can, salmon, cod, anchovies, sardines, etc. I didn't put anything here about sodium, but I'll add it here now. If you've got hypertension, if you wake up in the morning and you take your blood pressure and your morning blood pressure is above 135/80, then you really want to think about the DASH diet requirements, which are under 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. So don't add sodium. And that's another reason to avoid prepackaged food. And I think that was actually my 5th thing, was the switching up the meat, giving up the meat. Again, domesticated meat is a lot fattier than wild meat. Also, it doesn't have as many omega-3s in it, and it just wasn't the food that our ancestors were most likely consuming. If you are a hunter, again, no judgment, but the truth of the matter is that hunters are eating meat that is wild and leaner than those of us who are eating meat that is domesticated. That's just the way it is. Okay, and then the last thing I said, so you've got you know how many calories you can consume a day. You're eating a diet that's anywhere from 70 to 100% plant-based in terms of your caloric intake. So you're getting plenty of fiber, so your blood sugar is being stabilized. Try and have some protein with every meal, again, to keep your blood sugar stabilized. Keep it a low glycemic index. Cannot stress that enough, so you don't have blood sugar dysregulation and start having cravings. I usually recommend 3 meals a day, usually anywhere from 400 to 600 kcal, depending. That's with women I usually treat. If it's a man and he's bigger, we're going to go higher. Physical exercise, always a good idea. There's 3 types we emphasize. That's stretching, aerobic, and anaerobic. In my opinion, as a physician, and the data I've seen, I think swimming is by far one of the best forms of exercise out there because it does all 3. And it's easy on the joints. And so if you're obese, overweight, and you're frightened for your joints, get into the water. It'll protect your joints, but you'll still be burning a ton of calories, about 600 to 700 kcal an hour swimming. It's unbelievable. It's really, really good for you. And you'll be able to stretch, and it won't hurt as much as if you're trying to stretch out of the water. And then you might also want to get into the jacuzzi beforehand just to loosen up your muscles. If you, like I said, if you want to read this whole article, you can do so by going to drwhimsy.com, and I'll link it below. I want to thank you for watching this video. I did try and cover everything. I love this subject, and I love the way that I'm able to merge my undergraduate degree with my doctorate. And I apologize for my cough. I had stevia today. I don't usually have stevia in my coffee. Earlier I had a meeting, and it set me off. I don't know. I think I might have a sensitivity, but I've been coughing a lot, and I think it's the stevia. All right. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, and be sure and share, like, subscribe, and ask me questions. You know, I'd love to hear what you do in order to improve your health, if there's anything you feel like I could improve on in terms of what I just presented. Thanks for watching.